I want to share with you in this video the 5 main things that I learned from Russell and the experience of being in his Inner Circle Mastermind all those years ago, back in 2014 into 2015. So the first thing that comes to mind that Russell taught me, and this was an indirect lesson, he won't even know that he taught me this. It was something that I observed of him at his mastermind, and it has stuck with me years later. Russell, if you're watching this, you will not remember this. We were in a mastermind where, and it was Russell's mastermind, and you've got, I don't know, 30, 35 people around a U-shaped table. And one by one, we got to the front of the room, and we have 20 minutes to share with the group. And you can use that 20 minutes however you wish. You could use the 20 minutes to provide value to the group, or you could use that 20 minutes to ask questions of the group and get feedback from Russell and everyone else that was involved. And there was this one guy that went up there, and he was getting to the end of his 20 minutes and he was overrunning, and I just happened to be sat right next to Russell. And as this guy went 21 minutes, 22 minutes, 25 minutes, and we're all collectively trying to kind of, nudge him off the stage, but he's not getting the hint. We get to 27 minutes and I see Russell whip his phone out, and he makes sure that no one else is really seeing, and he texts his head of operations at the time, a guy called Brett, and I see him type this text that just says, "Get him off." And I remember seeing that and thinking to myself, I would have assumed Russell's mastermind, he's the authority, everyone's there to learn from him, and he's the respected one. He would have been able to say, "Hey man, sorry, your time's up, you need to stop now, and we're gonna get someone else on." But that's not his strength. That is not how Russell operates. He doesn't like confrontation. And so he's got a right-hand man that can say and do the things that Russell doesn't want to do. We can do good cop, bad cop. Russell's the good cop, and he's got someone else that's the bad cop. And I learned something in that moment. Focus on your strengths. We don't have to learn how to do everything. If you're not a confrontational person, if you just don't default to certain things that you feel you're under pressure that you should learn, actually no, you can hire a team of people. You can find other people that are better at certain things than you. And if it's coordinating a mastermind and delivering the bad news for certain things, then do that. So focusing on your strengths, that was a very interesting lesson I learned from Russell just by observing him in that moment. The second thing, and this was just a benefit of paying $25,000 to be in that mastermind, because although I just told you that I fell into it by mistake, I was never supposed to be there. Russell flew me out to train his clients, and I ended up, hanging out with their mastermind and liking it. I had never spent $25,000 before on my education or investing in myself. It just hadn't happened. Up until that point, I was spending thousands of dollars perhaps on courses, maybe $5,000 on a coaching program. Never had I spent $25,000. And so by making that investment, it was so interesting. Like, there was just this shift where I started thinking bigger. I felt like I could charge more for my services because now I know what it feels like to have the desire to spend that much money, and it's a lesson that you may need to learn as well. If you are trying to sell coaching services for $5,000 or $10,000, but you haven't spent that much on your own education, how can you expect someone else to feel convicted to join your program, right? Someone's gonna give you an excuse and say, "Oh, that sounds a bit expensive," and your default's gonna be, "Yeah, actually, I agree, it does feel quite expensive," because you haven't experienced spending that much. When I spent that $25,000 with Russell, suddenly, instantly, I started thinking bigger. I put my prices up, I started scaling, everything really started to take off from just that decision. The third thing I learned from Russell on a very practical note, in fact, this would be the main thing that he helped me with, was webinars. Back in 2014 into 2015, Russell was the main webinar guy, and I wanted to get into that world. And so that was one of the main things I used my time with Russell for, was focusing on a webinar presentation, a webinar funnel. And look, we're now 7-8 years on. I mean, things have changed dramatically from the way we did webinars back then. In fact, if I was to build a webinar in the same way that we did 7 or 8 years ago, it wouldn't work, right? Like, things have completely changed. But back then, Russell had the keys to the kingdom. And so I just followed him and his entire process. And it really gave me a good kickstart into that world, and started to have some great success with webinars. And then over the course of the last 7 to 8 years, I've been refining it and adapting my own flair to the script. And now that's the main thing we teach our clients. We've made literally millions of dollars. In fact, we've made $20 million with our webinar funnels, and we teach that to our clients. I absolutely love it, but I can point it all the way back to 2014 to 2015 when I was in Russell's mastermind and first learnt webinars and was introduced to webinars from Russell. The fourth lesson that I learnt from Russell, and this is a hard one to share because it kind of eats at my ego a little bit, as I'm sure it would do for you if you had to learn a lesson like this. I learnt while being in Russell's mastermind that I've got to take responsibility for my own actions, and I've got to take responsibility for my own business. Back in 2014, I had started to make some good money, but it was very up and down. And there were moments where I would complain. There were moments where I would not sulk, but not far from sulking. And there were moments where I could perhaps even blame a coach in Russell's program or any other third-party coach. And Russell had to share with me a bit of tough love and teach me this way of approaching your business, that it's no one else's responsibility. People are going to try and help you on your journey, but ultimately it's your business, it's your responsibility, and you've got to take that responsibility. And again, this might be a lesson that Russell, if he's watching this, may not even remember teaching me, but that lesson has gone with me throughout the years, and I really appreciated it. The fifth thing that I learned from Russell was actually the fact that your first marketing campaign may not work. In fact, you may have to try a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. And if you continue trying something new, you'll eventually get it to click. And I learned this lesson by observing Russell and the way that he launched Clickfunnels right back in the day. I was sat in that mastermind room with Russell when he first announced that he was launching Clickfunnels, and he had a big launch funnel that he had planned out, 4 videos, Jeff Walker style launch, and the big crescendo was that you sign up for Clickfunnels at the end. And I remember he came into one of the mastermind meetings and he was a bit deflated, and we all kind of asked him why and asked him to share how the results of the Clickfunnels launch went, and it didn't go great. I think he's talked about this in videos in the past. It didn't take off and he was frustrated. He thought these 4 videos were perfect. They should give someone the epiphanies and the journey they need to go on to realize that Clickfunnels is the answer, but people weren't signing up for it and people weren't buying it. And he tried a different funnel with a different marketing hook, and that didn't take off as well. And then eventually he figured out a certain type of webinar presentation with a certain type of offer that he's constructed for Clickfunnels that took off. And everything exploded from that one webinar. And I remember that like it was yesterday, watching his journey of trying a funnel, not working, trying another one, not working, boom, finally we've hit a winner, and now we scale. And again, that's a lesson that has stuck with me, that if we try a certain type of funnel and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean the funnel doesn't work. We may just not have implemented it correctly, or maybe there's a better way that we could have done it. And while we're talking about sales funnels, if you want to learn the perfect sales funnel for selling coaching, courses, or anything high ticket, check out this video up here. I break it down. This thing has made me millions, and I hope you enjoy it. Those were the 5 things I learned from Russell. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe on the channel, and I'll see you in a future video.